Jaclyn, welcome to Zen One Podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on.
I know. This is going to be fun. So we try to keep it short, interesting, no more than 3 hours. So,
All right.
the Rogan style. All right. So you're with the Cornerstone Avenue Consulting Group.
Yes.
Is it more consulting or coaching?
It is not really either of those.
Perfect.
Yeah. We like to call ourselves facilitators. So we do a little bit of all of that. We do teaching and coming in and really coming alongside the doctors. And so really helping get, right alongside them and helping do the work with them. So there is some consulting in there, but we run and do research for them. We are providing HR consulting. We are, helping in a lot of different areas. And so a lot of it's teaching them some of these areas that they may not know a whole lot about. And so, we try to come into a lot of different areas and teach, consult, and do the work with them.
And do the heavy lifting.
Yes.
That's so cool. So your claim to fame is, there are two things. One is you get to come in and actually do the work with them.
Yep.
With the practice. And the second one is operational, right?
Yes.
So what is operational excellence in your opinion?
Yeah. So a lot of that is streamlining it and making sure that everyone knows their role. And I think that can be really difficult in any organization because operations encompasses a lot. Mm-hmm. And so it's knowing exactly, who's doing what and, how do you ever improve? And when you kind of step back and look at any of that, it's a lot and it's very overwhelming for doctors to kind of know when they're wearing all the hats, what is, who's going to be taking care of what job, when, and what are they supposed to be doing? What are they supposed to give to their team members? And so you really want to make sure at every point that you are able to know what's happening. And I think that's a really big struggle for a lot of doctors.
Okay. So let's try to unpack that. Let's dive into that subject right away. So from roles and responsibilities, knowing who is in charge or responsible for what, how is it accomplished?
So a lot of it is clear expectations and defining duties. Okay. And I think a lot of that is when you are initially, opening a practice, taking things on, a lot of that rests on the doctor. And a lot of that doesn't happen. They kind of keep it all. And then, when they bring on that practice manager, they, roll things off to, their front office, those kind of things that it never is very clear, what the expectations are of their team. And so it's getting to that point of knowing, okay, this is what your role is, and this is where I am trusting you now to take that on. Right. And
let's unpack even that. So how is it done? Is it an Excel spreadsheet where you sit down and you just write down, all right, dental assistant, hygienist, office manager, front office, even doctor?
Yeah. So a lot of it comes down to SOPs and workflows.
Okay. SOP is?
Yeah. So standard operating procedures. Yeah. And so that right there is kind of your instruction manuals. And you don't need that for every, process that you have in your practice, but you want those for your important processes. And you want that to be, okay, who's doing that? When they're not doing it, who's going to be doing it? So when your office manager is out, who's going to be responsible for, handling, and overseeing the team? And, if you have a dental assistant that is doing the ordering, okay, now, and they're out, okay, who's going to be doing that? And those are what your SOPs are. And then you have your processes, and that's kind of the step-by-step, like, all right, this is where we go to put in the orders. This is where we go to make sure that they get submitted. This is where they get approved. And that's where the processes are. And so that's exactly where we want to, establish all of that and make sure that those are clearly defined and that the doctor knows what they are and the team knows what they are. And more often than not everyone knows. And we want those to be...
Most likely doctors have no clue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So again, what do you use for that? Like, is it like Google Docs or Trainual or?
So it really varies on the practice. And a lot of it, I think, is, it can be Word documents.
Okay.
It's really a matter of what makes sense for the practice. But, a lot of everyone has different budgets and different ways that they, use, work within their practice. So it's really a matter of like, how do you get in and out of your documents? What you want to make sure is that it's living documents. So you can create any kind of system, SOPs, processes, and they will immediately go down the drain if you don't have people that then are responsible for keeping them up. So
Ideally not the doctor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correctly. And I think that's kind of like the big issue that happens a lot is that you will spend, and I've seen this with doctors, is they spend and put a lot of time into creating these processes, and they may roll it off to a team, introduce it, and then 3-5 years down the road, it's living in Google Drive somewhere and never to be seen again. And that's not what you want to happen. And it's, how do you create, a culture and, get buy-in from your team for that not to happen?
How do you do that?
So a lot of it is from the very beginning, getting buy-in from the doctor. And so they have to know what is going to be happening and understanding, what you're trying to achieve by creating those SOPs, those processes, and having those clearly defined responsibilities. Once they know, and often getting the office manager involved, when you have those two and have a lot of buy-in from them, then you can get a lot of buy-in from the team. But that's the key part.
The doctor.
Yes.
Okay. I always think the key part, yes, the doctor, but who's your average customer?
So,
or ideal customer profile? Who would that be?
Small private practice. So,
can you define like maybe $1 million or a little bit above in like production?
I mean, it'd probably be like right at, $1 million in production.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So, and probably like on a younger side, right?
Yes.
Okay. So from what I've seen is people excited about systems, implementations, and things like that. And if you don't take the action right there that minute, forget about it.
Right.
Right. And so when I was trying to give you a little bit of a hard time, like, how do you actually do it? How do you do it? What do you use? It's like you have a morning huddle and everybody's like, hey, Ashley is out today. So what do we do? And everybody's like, I don't know. That moment, the doctor should open up the laptop, go to Google Docs, invite everybody on the team to that doc and say, we're starting it. SOP V1, version 1. Ashley is out. What was Ashley's role? And start writing things down, right? And then, all right, so if she can't do this today, who is going to take on that? So then I think everybody gets excited. It's so cool. Now the doctor is like closing the laptop and it's like, whew. All right, so Megan, your office manager, you got this, right? She's like, yeah, doc, I'm good. So doctor's like, all right, dun, dun, dun. How do I do my root canals and how do I do my crowns and stuff? So they're off.
Yeah.
How do you then keep it going?
At that point, a lot of it falls onto the front office and that team to be able to know, to take on that ownership. But a lot of it is knowing, okay, this is kind of the culture now. But it's knowing that there's these reference points and these living documents, because it's like, if no one's updating them and it's just kind of like this document that existed one time at one point.
How do you make people update it?
So a lot of it happens because, again, you can't make it for everything. So it has to be for your important processes. If you're submitting insurance claims, those kind of things. It can't be for answering the phone. And it can't be for, really simple things. It has to be for the complex and the important things that are very prone to errors, or a lot of, manual intervention.
Can I disagree for a second?
Go.
Just respectful, right?
Yeah.
Like I would love to take your take. So I feel like as soon as we say it's like for complex tasks, that's where people are like, oh my God, where do I start? But if you start with simple, like, all right, who's in charge of trash? Right? Or just as simple as air vac. Who's going to be in charge of turning on the vacuum in the morning? Right? So what's the process? Who's going to, just like, there's 3 steps. Open the door, turn on the lights, actually 4, sorry. Turn off the alarm, and then click the 2 buttons.
Yeah.
Right? And then you outline that, and then in brackets, you write, all right, so Megan, who's first in the office? Let's agree on that. Okay, so it's Megan. Megan, these 4 things on you, good. If anything changes, we'll talk about it. Do you think maybe it's easier to start with something simple and then move to like complex tasks once that is a little bit tested?
Absolutely. When you're creating a process, which is different than an SOP.
Yeah.
So when you're creating processes, absolutely. Simpler is better.
What's the difference between SOP and the process then?
So the SOP is like the instruction manual for everything.
Okay.
And that's kind of where you're saying who's responsible for it, who's going to be, when you need to troubleshoot something, like how are we going to troubleshoot it? Here are recommended tips. Here's going to be reference point sources. This is where you might, go. These are useful links
or contact information.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so that's different than your process. And you will not have as many SOPs as you will have processes. So you will see a lot of processes, which are a lot of checklists. And the checklist and the processes are everywhere in a dental practice.
Right.
So yes, you've got one for opening the office. You've got one for closing down. You've got one for, taking a payment. You've got one for how to answer the phone, in what order, if someone's at the desk, if someone's not, So there's a lot of different things that you kind of have to take into account. And yes, absolutely. Simpler is better when you're going to start creating them. And those are the easiest ones to get right. So
because you can't really screw up the 2 buttons for the air and vacuum. Yes. Right. So, okay.
You don't want to spend all your time creating really complex ones. And then everyone goes, nope, don't care. And don't want to spend time on that.
What would you tell the people that say like, Jackie, isn't it obvious? Like, whoever comes first, turn on the 2 buttons. Why do we need to create a document for that?
Redundancies.
Can you elaborate?
So, biggest thing is what happens when you lose staff. And it is so easy to go, it's obvious right now, but what do you do when Megan leaves and is gone? And it's the trickiest thing. And doctors see it a lot when they've had someone around for 10, 15, 20 years, and then they know that person's going to retire, and they all of a sudden are like, what am I going to do? I've, relied so much on this person, and they had so much in their head, and now what? And that's where you really want to, if you already had so much documented, and now when you hire someone or you promote someone else moves into that role, they have those reference points and can go in and say, okay, I can take over, I understand these things, and they're not going now to the doctor and saying, hey, I don't know where to go to order supplies. I don't know where to go to, make sure everything is turned on at the beginning of the day. So you really want to have those redundancies in place.
There's another one. I'm sure you've dealt with this. You have this key employee it doesn't happen often, but it happens that we can talk about it, right?
Yeah.
You have this one employee in the office that, especially, let's paint the picture. Somebody about our age buys the practice.
Oh, yeah.
An existing practice, right?
Yes.
I can even picture a couple of doctors now. They need to go, not only now they acquired the practice, they have to take care of the patients and this, that. Now the whole business side of thing comes into play because they didn't expect any of it, right? And at the same time deal with staff.
Yes.
Right? The staff is sitting there and thinking, all right, what is that going to look like? And the new doctors, before buying the practice, they listen to every podcast, right? Mark Costa, shared practices, bulletproof dentistry, like dental advice, any of this, right? So they took notes, they go in, they're ready, right? In their head, they're sitting in and they're like, I'm going to rip this thing apart, right? So we're going to put this system in place, that system in place. And the staff is like, not happening. Then slowly you get everybody to your site except one person. There's going to be one person that's just like not buying into this, right? And then usually two things happen. I don't know, maybe three, but we can talk about it. One is that person is so valuable, and God forbid it's a dental assistant, because that would be the worst. Like, that person has so much knowledge about the procedures, about the patients, about how to set up the rooms, how to buy supplies, and the whole thing. And then you're like trying to change a lot of stuff, and that person is not into this, right?
Yep.
And you're like, I'm stuck. On top of it, that person comes and says, you know what, Dr. New, awesome. I deserve a raise. Like, I've been at this office for so long and I make $28 an hour. I think I deserve $30 an hour. Like, you go figure out how to make that happen. And then your doctor is sitting and thinking, oh, I don't have a choice, right? The second option is you do what you described. You have the SOPs. You slowly start writing things down. You start like at the expense of the production. Like closing down the office at 4 o'clock, and from 4 to 5, you have everybody just start writing things down, like in the shared document.
Right.
But then when that person comes in and is like, I want $30, you're like, is that an ultimatum? Right. And then I think you have a little bit more choices, right? So what do you think? Have you seen that?
Yeah. So it definitely gives you, a lot more, freedom to be able to not be quite so beholden to
cornered.
Any specific, team member. And it does, it helps with making sure that you can have, when you are taking over a practice, that you have everything in place. And so, definitely have seen that. And honestly, I've even seen the flip side. So I have a client that they acquired a practice, and someone had been there 30 plus years, but didn't know everything. And the thing is that the doctors needed to know everything, but they were trusting this person too. But the person now has been out on extended leave. And now they're all of a sudden finding discrepancies in how insurance claims have been filed. And so now it's like an even bigger fire because they don't know how things were done. This person's out on leave, and it's even more difficult, because there isn't any of that documentation, and you don't have that person that's around. And so you're now struggling to try to put all the pieces together. And so that's the other struggle that you can have too, is trying to know, did they know processes? And, it just somehow mistakes were made. Did they not know them to begin with, even though, they've been here for a really long time? Do we not know what we're doing? And so, documentation all around can help.
Yeah.
So,
what are the worst case scenarios that you've seen?
Worst case scenario I've seen, insurance fraud. Was
like front office?
Yes.
Oh my God. Yes.
So, and simply because no one knew who was supposed to be doing what. And this, front office member did not know that it was their job to be updating and doing the credentialing.
So it was unintentional?
It was unintentional.
Oh, it's even worse.
Yes. And so they were doing it, but their, the previous seller had never told them that this is how you should correctly be submitting the NPIs and putting them on the claims. And they thought, well, this is how we handled it when we had, locum tenens doctors, and then we're going through and we're like, no, that's not actually how you should be doing it. And so when the new doctors were coming in, then they're trusting again that this was the case. But again, it was not, they don't handle the credentialing, they were trusting the office manager to do it.
Right.
And it just came through with some other things that they were handling. And
yeah,
again, it's kind of like those, when you don't have clearly defined roles, it wasn't really her job. She was just helping out a little. No one had ever specifically told her. And then it kind of came out that way. So yeah,
wow.
it was really hard.
So from your experience, even based on this issue, what do you think are the top maybe 5 issues that are super, super expensive if you don't get them right in the dental office? Like turning on air vac, it's an issue. You may not have a procedure, but like insurance seems like a big deal. Like what are those, like for somebody that's listening and like, all right, I don't have time for everything, but you should nail like this 1, 2, 3, 4 things. What are they?
Yeah. Definitely, I would probably say, making sure that obviously like your credentialing is in place. So it's knowing who's handling that. Because and a lot of it comes down to compliance. So it's like, who's handling your compliance? And I think that's often a very, fuzzy, responsibility as to who's handling, is it the doctor? Is it the office manager in terms of who's taking care of credentialing and when, and who's getting the notifications, which email is it going to? That can create a lot of fines. Obviously, it's making sure that you have a lot of systems in place for your accounts receivable because of embezzlement. That's one place that, there's a lot of places that you can create really easy systems just simply by having separation of roles. And that can create a lot of costs.
To create the system, or if you don't have a system, it will create a lot of costs?
If you don't have the system in place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like expensive.
Yes.
When you go to, let's just say somebody calls you and they say, like, Jackie, I need help. What do you look at first? Like, what are the things you go through first?
So we go through a practice management audit with our clients, and the first things that we look at are a lot of it is your people and going through who does what, and then what systems you even have in place. So do you have any, processes and SOPs that you do already live by, whether they are formal or not? And so if they're not, then we work with you to create them.
Where do you start?
And I'm sorry?
Where do you start? Like, let's just say I own an office. It's a total mess.
Yeah.
I call you.
So a lot of it, we start a lot in the HR side, and a lot of that, it's easy wins onboarding. Because it is, we want staff retention. And the easiest way is most practices don't have a very clear onboarding process for their team.
And I also like in the beginning, you said, when we talked about the retention, I love how you phrased, you said, when your staff leaves. You didn't say if your staff leaves.
Yeah.
So like every person in your practice at some point is going to leave, including you.
Absolutely.
As a doctor. So let's get ready for that.
Yep.
Okay. So on the HR side of things, what have you seen that costs people a lot of money if they don't do it?
Honestly, it's the onboarding. Okay. I think that's such a big. I'm very passionate about that part. I think that there is so much that gets missed in that side, and that I think doctors as employers fail to get right. there's a lot that's, when you are trying to hire someone and you very much are looking at that first impression.
You're excited.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, got butterflies. Let's go.
Yeah. But I think, so much you forget that you as the employer have to set a first impression too. And more often than not, there is not a really great impression when that new hire comes in. It's here's your role, here are your tasks, get to work, and you might have the first 3 days, here's shadow me, here's what we want you to do, here's how our practice is different than a different office, and that's about it. And I think that is not a really great way to onboard any team member, and it should be so much more thought out than that if you want to keep someone more than a year.
Is there a formula in your head? Like, let's just say, I don't know, hypothetically, the more hours you spend on onboarding, the more months you're adding for a person to stay in the practice?
I would not specifically, but I would say that if you at least invest in their first 90 days, that I think you have a much higher percentage of them staying past their first year than not.
And what would that 90 days look like? 'Cause the argument you would hear from most practices would be, I would much rather avoid all the paperwork and do like 1099 for the first month and get them in the fire and then see if they survive. And then we can do all these nice things and sit down and talk about culture and stuff.
So quickly then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think their first 90 days, a lot of it is spending time, not necessarily like, having them side by side. Assumedly, if they have been in the industry for a while, they are going to be able to get in there quickly. It's ensuring that they have adequate training over the course of those 90 days. And a lot of that is making sure that that you've set out correct expectations, and that's been laid out over that 90 days. And so it's like, what do you want them to know about your practice? What do you want them to be sure that they have been trained on in that time? And what do you want them to know about you, your team, in that time? And so a lot of it is, okay, do you want them to be trained on the PMS, more thoroughly? Are there videos that they need to be taking? Do they need to have their OSHA and HIPAA, training in that period of time? Do you want them to sit down and understand fully, how to do any process related to submitting insurance claims the way you do it in that time, and not go to month 6, month 9 and go, wait, do you not know how to, submit claims for Blue Cross Blue Shield our way? And I think that's kind of where it's understanding and having that level of expectation very clear so that there's not any frustration, going forward. And for that team member, it helps them go, okay, this is what is expected of me. I think that's how it makes it very easy for them to go, this is my low bar I've got to meet, and this is it, because this is a standard role, for front office, dental assistant. And as long as I'm doing that, they'll pay me, but why should I go above and beyond? They've laid out nothing more that I should be doing, should be striving to do. And so it's like, I think the more that you lay that out for them and give them those clear expectations, that guidance, the more they get excited and the more that they get that really good impression of your team.
Yeah. How do you feel about having a document that starts with working with Dr. Awesome? And then Dr. Awesome sits down and says, we start at 8 o'clock. At 8:05, we have a morning huddle. And I typically get irritated when people show up at 8:05. So I love personally when people show up at 8:04. Then after this is how we usually do morning huddle. These are the things that I look at during the morning huddle. Then we're done. Then we go to I like when our office manager, Megan, initiates the high fives that gives me chills and butterflies. And then we're all off to the treatment rooms and treating patients. And then I go to room 1. And if I sit down and if I don't have everything laid out, that drives me nuts. Like, how do you feel about that kind of document?
I think that's better than nothing, and I think that is, I would much prefer that doctors do that than go
read my mind.
Yes. And so, no, I think that would be great if more doctors did that.
But they're terrified to put on paper because I feel like some won't because they're just not going to think about it. But I also feel that maybe culturally they're not feeling excited about putting down on a paper who they truly are. Like, it's okay sometimes to be demanding stuff. Like if you walk in the room and you want to see 50 patients a day, the room needs to be ready.
Right.
And like, just put on a paper and say, I'm going to flip out.
Yeah.
Like I'm literally going to yell bananas that I'm pissed.
Yeah.
Like, but they're going to be afraid to put that on paper.
No, I think again, it's all about expectations. And I think it is much better to have those than for it to take months for someone to figure that out. And no one goes into a job wanting to be a mind reader, and having to.
No one?
No. They would, I think, much rather it be clearly, understood, okay, this is what you want from me and this is how I'm going to be able to deliver, or these are my strengths and this is how I'm going to be able to show up for you. And I think it makes everyone work so much better as a team when there's a lot more communication.
Yeah. Can I add like a couple more things that we talk about on this podcast a lot with several guests? And I don't see that happening a lot, and I wish I would. Like the way I do agree with you, onboarding is super critical. Like it's extremely critical. And the more detailed the checklist, like even that it's consistent. And I think the key about writing it down is you onboard, let's just say 3 people using the checklist. Like now you will see the pattern. Maybe this should be first and that should be last.
Right.
And you can go back and tweak the checklist.
Absolutely.
So now it's easy. The second part is the cool thing about checklists is you can start adding questions. Like what are the questions you want to ask the person on the first day, 5th day, or throughout those 30 days? And it's like, hey, what kind of movies do you like? What kind of this? Or my favorite question is, how do you want to be admired? Right? So like there's certain, or like acknowledged. Certain people love just like, do you want bonus? Do you want time off? Or do you want to get in front of the team and we say, Megan, you rock this last month. Like what you did here was phenomenal. Everybody, let's give it applause, right? So like, and these are all 3 different things. Some can be combined, some can't. I feel like there's some people that say, I want cash, but don't talk about me. And there are people that say, please give me a praise. I don't need the money. These are the 2 camps.
Yeah.
And in between, they can say, it'd be nice to get 2 days extra off. So like, I think people don't talk about specifically for that person. And then a lot of doctors are running around like, I offered them a week off. I don't understand like why they're not happy. Like, what do they think? Like, imagine 15 years ago when I was doing this, like if somebody would give me a week off, like what would that happen? Like, no, just address it to the specific person. I think the second thing is people don't talk about offboarding. So like, it's part of my checklist. We everybody who gets hired on a W-2, we talk about, all right, there's going to be a day when we part ways. Like, let's talk about how we're going to do it.
Yep.
And we actually have an outline, like praise, cash. You want 2 weeks, and then the more you stay with the company, the more we pay you. Like it's not 2-week pay, it's like 3 week, 4 weeks, so that you got more time to go and find another job, like things like that. You actually put it on paper.
Yeah.
And then you can, on one-on-ones or annual reviews, you can revisit that and say, look, you've been here for actually 5 years. I don't know we're going to last that long together. But here we are, 5 years. Like, should we adjust the document? Should we change things around? Like, you adjust. And then when you actually part ways with a person, it's actually really easy. You're like, hey, Megan, it's not working out. Like, do we follow the plan we have or something changed? She's like, follow the plan. Done. 3 minutes. You fired the person. Everybody's happy.
Yeah.
So, and then I forgot the third one. I knew it was there. Oh, whatever. But what do you think about these two?
Yeah. No, I am in full agreement. I really love that because everything does speak differently to different people. You know, it's especially the more the hiring landscape has changed and what matters to different people, you know? And so different things are important to different people. And so, and people are not near as, you know, timid to share about it. You know, this is what matters to me. This is what I will leave over this. And it's not necessarily compensation.
Exactly.
It can be other things. And so you do need to understand, you know, what your team cares about and that it is not across the board the same.
Yeah.
Offboarding, 100% agree. And it absolutely matters and it makes it so much easier. And I think it's difficult to think about because you don't want to go there with your team. You know, you care about them so much, or it's a really awkward, you know,
it's super awkward
position that you're in.
Yeah.
And so you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't want to think about it. When you get there, you kind of scramble and you just kind of go, okay, well, what do I have to do? And I don't want to understand why or how it happened or what we need to do to get better. And the more that you can improve that process and you can get feedback from it, you can find out how to improve with the team that you still have. There's a lot of things that you can get out of offboarding someone well. And so the more that you can just own that situation and do it well, I think it benefits everyone.
I think to your point, I love the documentation that we're trying to drill down for the last 20 minutes on people. Like, even I think expectations, not like a lot of times when people hire, and I think I'll come back to my thought. In the last 3 years or 4, I think what really changed is in the past, I feel that dental practice, when they were hiring people, they kind of felt like, hey, I'm hiring. We're going to play by my rules.
Yep.
And it kind of shifted, right?
Yeah.
It shifted 180 in 2020, 21, 22, but now I think it's kind of coming back to equal.
Right.
Meaning you don't sit down with a dental assistant, hygienist, or office manager front person and be like, you need me more than I need you. You're like, we need each other.
Yes.
You need an office to go to and enjoy the work that you don't feel like you're just a cog in the system. And I need you because there's certain things we need in this practice, right? So like, how do we make this happen? That's the conversation, which I absolutely love that. Like, that's a great change in the industry. Now, but I also think, it's not but, on top of it, since now it's the even playing field for both to interview each other, it's not just an employer expectation on employee, it's the employee expectation on employer.
Right.
So if you do say, like, what are the benefits? Okay, you got the compensation package, right? So, okay, I got my pay, but what else? All right, we offer health, but most dental offices will say, well, we offer free dentistry for you. Okay, then you need to, in my view, you need to deliver that in the form of, this is how it's actually done. Like, every quarter, we shut down on Fridays, once a quarter, and then you're more than welcome to bring your family or just you or your kids or your mom, and that day is blocked. If you just go and say, we have it, like, it's free, like whatever, we have a gap in the schedule, that never happens.
Right.
You actually, to your point, you need to write it down.
Yeah.
Like that people can say, okay, so they're legit. Like,
yes,
they say they do it, they actually do it, and maybe they can send me a screenshot of the last quarter when they did it, so I believe them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think because there is so much of that, like, you want to hear that it's true, but it's almost like, I'm not going to believe it until I see it. And And to that fact, it's like no one has a problem with job hopping now, you know? So it's like, if I don't see that your practice is actually, doing what you said you said that your practice was doing, then I'm going to go find a practice that actually follows through. And so I think that's also the other thing. If you want to avoid them going, well, it's been a quarter and I haven't seen you deliver on anything, and then they immediately jump, you need to have kind of that proof to some level to prevent them from almost prematurely leaving, because they'll go find somewhere else that's going to make them feel where they are valued and that they're getting the benefits that they want.
Right. Okay. Let's move on. Besides HR, what are the other operational things that you guys focus on?
So we help out a lot with tech stack, and a lot of that is not only helping with understanding and choosing platforms, doing the research for you, but it's also just having that digital infrastructure set up for you. And a lot of that is just knowing, okay, password managers and what should your emails be set up as. Sometimes it's if everything's going to, one person and then that person leaves, okay, that's not necessarily the way you want to have things set up if you want to have good redundancies built in place. And so we kind of go through your tech stack in a lot of different ways and make sure that you are set up for success. And so we'll look at that. We'll look at record keeping and make sure that the way that you're organizing your files makes sense, that it is compliant, not only for HR purposes, but for audits. And so the way that you're keeping your invoices and receipts, and if you're going to be, getting audited by, any of the, for there's so many different kinds of audits that you're going to have. If you're going to, be pulled for I'm blanking on the kind of audit right now.
I know,
but
OSHA. That's the only one
yes.
I know.
That's not the one I was thinking of, but sales and use tax audit. That's 3 years worth of invoice and receipts that they will sometimes look for, and the way you have that saved down is sometimes.
I have a story about that.
All right.
So we had an office on Zen. I hope they're not listening. But, there's nothing to share. It's just, my point is, like, working with vendors, sometimes offices have this attitude of like, we're going to use them until we need them, and then we're going to get rid of them like it's a plastic bag from the grocery store. And I always didn't like that, and I kept telling all my clients, like, hey, you're actually going to see us outperform my competition when you cancel the subscription. So what I mean by that is, we had an office that was using the platform, and then they were jumping back and forth, and then there was a kind of nasty email that they sent, and we just paused their account. Like, I knew, like, they're going to need the data. I don't know why I thought that, but we paused, which we do for a lot of accounts, and we didn't charge for it. And then I think it was 2 years after when they came back with a very, very nice email, to the point where, like, would you be kind to send us our past invoices, because we're going through the audit. So, like, don't burn bridges.
Yeah.
People.
Yes.
Be nice. Like, learn to communicate. Give people, like, reasons and be honest, the feedbacks, but just do your thing. Like, nobody expects you to be perfect, but just be a human.
Yeah. Communicate.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, to your point, I think it is pretty cool that you guys do that.
Yeah.
Are you in favor of using, like, something, let's just say awesomedentistry@gmail.com, or, ordering at awesomedentistry.com?
Ordering at awesomedentistry.com.
Why?
Yeah, I think it comes across more professional, and there's a lot of ways, again, depending on how your servers are set up and your email accounts, to make them group emails so that they are being sent to the right people, whether it's a shared email list or a shared inbox. And so depending on how you set it up, there are much easier benefits than it just being a Gmail account that multiple people have access to. But I'm anything that can make it more professional, I'm also just a big fan of.
Just on that rabbit hole in emails, if the office's name is, what is the town, McKinney? Mm-hmm. Let's just say McKinney Family Dentistry and Orthodontics. Like, are you in favor of orders at McKinney Family Dentistry and Orthodontics.com? Because we've seen that, right? Like, it's annoying.
Oh, I would definitely find a way to shorten that.
But like, would you tell them like, fine, keep that one, like hello at McKinney Family Dentistry and Orthodontics.com, but then shorten it to like FDAO.com, something like that. Yeah. And then just have everybody in the team use those shorter emails.
Yeah. I mean, I would somehow find a way to, it doesn't help if it's some incredibly long domain name. And so if there is a way to make it recognizable still, but where shorter. It's, shorter, definitely go that route.
Yeah. So I didn't know you actually like advise or do you actually help people set up their Gmail accounts or like business Gmail accounts?
So we don't do the actual technical side of it, but yes, in terms of like, these are the emails you need and then who should be on them and what logins you're using for which ones, yes. We do.
What emails do you typically recommend people to set up?
So the main ones are going to be billing and
like billing
hello.
ads.
Yes. Hello or info. It's something like operations that's specifically more for the doctors and their office manager. That's going to be one.
That would be operations ad, or would you call it ops?
Yeah, operations.
Like a full spelled out.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is one. And so those are probably the three
Orders. AP.
Well, yeah, and that's definitely one. It depends on like how they're going to be using it because it can fall in the billing. And I try to not advise on too many, depending on how big their practice is, or how small, really. I don't want it to get too complicated where it becomes too much to manage, or they're like, I don't know which one to send it to, so I'm just going to send them all to this one. Because then again, that defeats the purpose.
Right.
And so it's the bigger the practice, the more emails there will, exist then.
Yeah. And so you would be in favor of setting up those general emails like the billing, the operations, where stuff is being sent out, but then you still have your Dr. Awesome at
yes, and it's not necessarily Megan. Yeah, it's not necessarily for stuff to be sent out; it's for things to come in.
Right.
So it is, when you're having all those invoices after you have orders, that all those invoices are coming into one place, and that when that one person leaves, they're not, and you shut off their email, that now all of a sudden you're having to go back in and go, okay, now we've got to change that email address everywhere, or what was being sent to that person, and having to chase down and figure all that out is really can become really complicated.
Annoying.
The longer that person has been there, and depending on what they were in charge of.
Right.
And so and especially with logins too. So then if it's of a really important login that was tied to one person, and then if they had 2-factor authentication tied to them. And so
that goes to their cell phone.
Yes,
oh
exactly.
That's my favorite.
Oh, I know.
And then I got to call. Megan just left, and you're like, God, I got to call Megan.
Yep, we didn't think about that before we decided to terminate her.
Before I said something. Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool. So emails is a big stuff. So the tech stack, meaning all of the, if you look at your QuickBooks and you go to your P&L, you basically should have a category that says like office tech or something like that, where you will see all these charges like Mango Voice and whatever the PMS, Open Dental or stuff like that. Is there anything that you see in a tech stack that you didn't see 5 years ago that surprises you now that you see it there?
Not really. I feel like, everything is is pretty. I pretty much anticipated it.
How many companies do you see on people's P&Ls typically? Like, what's the range now?
It's quite a few. I mean, it's 20 plus.
20?
Yeah.
I thought it would be 5 to 7.
Oh no.
What are those 20?
I mean, it comes across with so many and often it's little things, that
Like what?
it's from their bookkeeping platform to their EMS to their phone, reputation management. If they do insurance verification, if they've got inventory supply, if they've got
That's a good one to have.
That's right.
Right.
If they've got subscriptions to TVs, or if they've got any of the like tools that they use, like
Netflix and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so those are on there. We've got membership platforms. We've got I'm trying to think. There are so many, and
You look at it quite often at like what people have in the P&Ls.
Not like their P&L specifically, but a lot of it is looking more so like in what they have. Does it all like make sense? And
Like
so
if you see 2 Netflix accounts, you're like, is your home Netflix on the business credit card?
yeah, well, and it's more so like, why are we paying for 2 if you've got features, within one of these? So it's like, trying to think, but sometimes they'll be testing out different platforms, so you'll see that a lot. But yeah, it's more so like, and that's one thing that we do help out with, is just making sure that they're maximizing the features. That, because sometimes you'll find out, like we do actually already, we're paying for this feature in some other platform, or we could upgrade, one of our platforms, and it might cost a little bit more, but it would be cheaper than us paying for this secondary platform, and now it's already integrated to now. And so it's, how do we optimize, maximize, and make sure we're getting the most for our money.
Got it. Okay, so what's next? So HR onboarding, we talked about it. We talked about the tech stack. What's the next thing?
Compliance. So
Describe compliance.
So compliance is a lot of things.
Right.
It is OSHA, HIPAA, HR, PCI, IT, and a lot of it. So obviously we are not the best at all of those things, but what we do like to do is make sure that you're doing it all. And more often than not, you're not. And so we will come in, help either recommend vendors that can help, or platforms, and then make sure that you're aware of deadlines and federal law changes or state changes that are going on. And a lot of that is related to HR. But we have great partners that we partner with for HIPAA and OSHA. And so a lot of it is just making sure that they are aware, and then having simplified ways to keep track of all of it. When it comes to compliance, there's just a lot of deadlines. And then, if you all of a sudden get past the deadline, then you're out of compliance, or you need to, make sure everyone's get training and all of those kind of things. So we help keep all of that front of mind to make sure that they're doing all of that.
Yeah. There are so many times I wanted to tackle compliance. Well, hopefully we will at some point. It's just, we're so busy with orders. But every time I'm sitting and thinking, we should build a new product, compliance is on top of my mind.
Yeah.
Just like, gotta simplify that stuff. It's just so complicated. Look at, now there's some solutions on the market, like software solutions that help with that. Some do better than others, but I feel like there's still room for improvement.
Yeah, there definitely is. And I will say, it is interesting how many practices just don't take the first step in compliance. And
because they don't get penalized.
they are going to start. They are actually, I think it's May of this year, they started, proactively auditing practices.
The OSHA?
Yes. And so it's going to be, well, no, I think it's not OSHA. I think HIPAA. And so.
Who's governing HIPAA? Like which agency? You may not know the answer. No, it's okay. It just came to my mind. Like, I wonder who is actually going to be showing up at the office. Not like your local fire department.
Yeah. No.
So I'm just curious who would be the agency.
Yeah. Yeah, because they were only doing it more reactively and waiting till someone complained or, there was an issue, but now they're proactively going to be auditing practices, which is a big deal. Yeah.
Okay, so, and then what's the cherry on top? Like when you go through all these things, do you create the SOP at the end, or like how do you wrap this all together into a document or training? Do you keep track with, or do you stay in touch with them on a monthly basis? Like what's...
Yeah. So we do that initial audit with our clients, and then we are meeting with them on a monthly basis, even more frequently, depending on the package that they do choose. But then it is teaching them along the way. And a lot of it is custom tailored. So it's depending on what their priority is based on where they are in their practice. So if they have, a bigger need at that point for HR, we'll focus on that. Or if they have a bigger need for compliance at that point, we'll focus on that. But we'll cover everything and go through it and really tackle all of the issues, teach them about these topics. We've got video lessons that we are dropping along the way. We are teaching them, we're providing deliverables, and then creating those SOPs and workflows for the areas that they need them, where they may not have had them before. And then, really making sure that they've got, well-defined duties and responsibilities for their team. And so really just kind of, understanding their practice and making sure that there are a lot of ways that we can streamline and optimize for them. And so...
Yeah. Actually, I wrote earlier, what is credentialing?
Credentialing is making sure that doctors are credentialed with the insurance companies.
So meaning they have accounts with like Deltas of the world and Blue Cross Blue Shield, or credentialing is something more than just having an account with them?
So it is making sure, so with the insurance companies, they are going through and making sure that the doctors are correctly licensed and are still up to date on all of their credentials. And so, yeah.
Okay. So then I guess as we start wrapping this up, what do you think? So now you do work with private offices.
Absolutely.
And the benefit that you and I have is we see a lot of them. And every office thinks that their challenges and successes are unique.
Yeah.
And more so challenges are kind of similar with everybody. What do you think are like the top challenges that private offices have?
I think it's, I don't know if it'll always be this way, but again, it's always, the biggest one is going to be staff, retention and engagement. And
if you unpack that, like, I would like for you to give it a little bit more. Like, do you think the staffing and retention, because they're sitting in some area that's really hard to find people? Or do you think it's more the offices are not doing, like those private offices, not doing enough work to attract, retain, maintain, and excite their team members? Like, what do you think is the challenge?
I mean, we need another podcast for it.
All right. I get it. Part 2 is coming.
Yeah. There's so much to it. I think it's a lot of variables. It's not only the practices, but it's the hiring landscape and the candidates that are out there that are asking for a lot more and wanting a lot more from, their employers. So it's a little bit from both sides.
And so let's just turn the tables a little bit. And if you would, if let's just say somebody gives you ungodly amount of money and say, Jaclyn, you no longer can have Cornerstone Avenue. We want to hire you full time to run our practice. What are the things now that and you've seen that you would implement, like going to the offices, or be cautious about?
I think it would be there's not going to be any perfect practice out there that is going to have everything. And so it's a matter of like, do you have a team that communicates really well and has a really big thing is a level of self-awareness at what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are as a practice.
How do you do that?
And
as a person, how do you do that?
It's a lot of like self-reflection. And so the owner has to know, and the, you know, as a practice, you kind of have to know this is where we excel and this is where we, you know, where we have a lot of work to do. And I think those are kind of the practices that, you know, are gonna go places because they know where they do really well and where they can focus on to do better. So
what's your take on, these are kind of like rapid fire questions. What's your take on people saying DSOs will take over the private practice ownership in the next 10 to 15 years?
Yeah, I sometimes used to think that, you know, because it just seemed like it was trending so much that way. But I do think that there is so much that doctors are seeing with DSOs that it's just not, that DSOs don't offer, you know, and that there's so much more freedom and so much more ability to grow, you know, and that you just have the ability to really be able to manage so much more on your own as a private practice that you really can't with a DSO, you know, and you're really limited to how far you can get. And so I don't think they are going to be taking over. They're here to stay, but they will not be taking over. So
then what do you think is the threat for the private practice ownership?
I think it is the level of burnout that doctors get from private practice. And so it's how do you help them not burn out? And a lot of them, I think, do recognize that it's how do we get that outside help, you know? And so I think they do bring in a lot more, you know, consultants. They rely on a lot more platforms. They, you know, look in a lot more different ways, forums, you know, go to a lot more CE and want a lot of help in getting to that place where they can succeed really well, and not burn out, but it's, can they do that and find the right places that will get them there. So
do you think there's a like positive side of the burnout?
Others learning from that? You know, I think I think it's just a matter of like, almost with anything in any generation, you know, it's like you'll see some that suffer and you'll kind of learn and observe from that and go, okay, this is how I can do better from that. So I think there's, you know, it's, yeah, there will be positives from it and people go, okay, thank you for the lessons and what you went through. Now I know, you know, what I can do better because of that.
But meaning, like, do you think there's good stress?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there is. I think it's, can you manage it? And so...
Well, that's how you find out. Like, if it gets bad, like, you can't manage it. You need help.
So, no, I think there is, because I think that's how a lot of people grow. And so, if you don't have that stress, it almost can limit you in some ways. And so, no, I think there's absolutely good stress.
Okay. And then if somebody's listening, when do you think, based on what you described, when is a good time for someone to call you?
We love them when they're starting out.
Like
so,
startups?
Yes, we love startups because it's simply laying that great foundation. So we love helping to build and create the systems from the very beginning and, you know, helping them build and create that vision. So that's the best.
Sorry,
best place to
85% of the listeners. Jaclyn cannot help you.
but we love them at every stage, and that's just the best and most fun stage. But we have plenty that are well into growing or are mature practices, and it's, for those, it's, being able to step back and go, okay, where are the pain points, and that's what we're gonna focus on.
Is there anything you can share with listeners, like maybe a sample of your checklist, that they get a feel of what you do, so then they will feel more compelled to reach out to you?
Yeah, so we have a framework that we work off of, and it's the Cornerstone framework. And so we really work off of that foundation, which is we work off of people and strategy and systems. And so in that's kind of the core of what we really focus on to begin with. And we dive into that and make sure that that's all really set up. And then after that, then we focus on compliance and accountability. And that's where we make sure everything's stabilized. And then after that, we're optimizing. And so we're optimizing tech stack, PPO management, and making sure that everything's really fine-tuned at that point. And so that's, really the, envision it as a triangle and how we're working up the frame. And so we really want to create a really great foundation for all of our practices to make sure that they are really working through all of the key points of their practice first before kind of moving through all the other areas. So.
Got it. So I'll be able to link this up to send people, if they're interested, to check out your website and the triangle framework.
Yes.
All right. Any departing thoughts?
I think, I just highly encourage, any practice out there to make sure in any way to, create systems and to really find accountability with their team. And, I think you'll thrive. So
awesome. Jaclyn, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. It was an honor.
Thank you.